The bells of Frosthaven tolled slow and heavy, their echoes drifting over the frost-covered rooftops like a funeral hymn. The great city was alive again after the siege, but its heart beat unevenly, as though every street carried both relief and dread in equal measure. Merchants reopened their stalls beneath patched banners, smiths hammered iron in courtyards still stained with blood, and children played where shadows of beasts had stalked only nights before. Yet every smile faltered when Lord Rohan passed. He rode through the morning streets with Aelin at his side, the heart's faint glow hidden beneath his cloak. Whispers trailed after him. To some, he was the savior who had broken Kaelor's beast. To others, he was the very reason Frosthaven's skies had darkened with sorcery. "They say the shard is bound to him now," one woman murmured as he passed. "Bound? Possessed, more like," another whispered, clutching her child closer. And yet who else could have stood against the Shadow Lord's spawn? Rohan heard it all, every word a thorn pressing deeper. His knuckles whitened on the reins, but he kept his head high, jaw tight. The wolf could not bare his throat to the pack. In the council chamber, the mood was colder still. A circle of lords and ladies sat cloaked in furs, their faces grave, their voices sharp with suspicion. Chancellor Tervain presided, his thin hands folded over a parchment already inked with accusations. "Frosthaven rebuilds," he began, "but under what banner? The people whisper of sorcery, of shadows clinging to our lord. They say the heart beats not for Frosthaven, but for Kaelor." Lady Eris, her eyes like shards of ice, leaned forward. "We cannot deny what we saw. A beast torn apart not by steel, but by power beyond mortal reach. If the wolf commands such forces, then what separates him from the very foe we fight?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Lord Dareth, scarred from past wars, slammed his fist against the table. "Enough. Were it not for him, your bones would litter the courtyard. Have you forgotten so swiftly the night we bled together? But doubt was a poison once spilled, impossible to contain. Every counselor remembered the frost that leapt without command, the way Rohan's eyes glowed with otherworldly fire when the heart pulsed in his chest." Outside the chamber, in a darkened alcove, two figures met in whispers. Cloaked and hooded, they spoke not of loyalty but of opportunity. "The wolf grows stronger," said one, his voice low. "But his leash is thin. If the heart slips further into him, he may tear down Frosthaven himself." "Then we act before he does," replied the other, pressing a wax seal into the first man's palm. "The council debates, but we move. Quietly. And when the wolf stumbles, we will be ready to strike." Unaware of the conspiracy, Rohan stood upon Frosthaven's walls that night, gazing out over the white wastes. Aelin joined him, her cloak drawn tight, her breath misting in the cold. "They do not trust you," she said softly. Every whisper grows louder. Every lord sharpens their dagger in secret. Rohan's jaw tightened. "Then let them. I swore to guard this city, not to beg for its love. If they think me a monster, then so be it. But I will be a monster that defends them, not devours them." Aelin touched his arm. "Even monsters fall, Rohan. And when they do, it is their own kin who strike first." Her words hung heavy in the air, heavier than the frost-laden silence. Rohan stared out into the night, but the darkness seemed closer now, pressing against the walls, whispering with Kaelor's voice. And in the streets below, cloaked figures moved like shadows through the alleys, the first pieces of treachery sliding into place. The wolf was not only hunted from beyond the walls, but within them too. The next morning, the council convened again, but this time the chamber was not alone in its disputes. Word had spread that an envoy from the south had arrived, bearing gifts and promises. The envoys came wrapped in sable cloaks, their retinue marked by banners of crimson and gold, the crest of Veynar, the great southern kingdom whose armies marched on fertile plains rather than snowbound fields. Rohan entered last, every head turning as he strode to the long table. The envoy, a tall man with dark hair braided in the southern style, rose and bowed low. "My lord of Frosthaven," he began, voice smooth as oiled silk, "I come bearing greetings from his grace, King Armathor of Veynar. News of your valor has reached even our warm coasts. The breaking of Kaelor's beast is spoken of as far as the sapphire seas." Rohan said nothing, only inclined his head. The envoy smiled faintly, as if he expected the silence. "But praise alone does not cross mountains," the envoy continued. My king sends not only words, but an offer, alliance. Veynar has grain, steel, ships. All Frosthaven lacks. Together, our realms could stand unbroken, even against Kaelor's storms. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Grain, ships, steel. These were treasures as precious as any gem in a land where winters starved and seas froze. But Rohan knew well. No alliance came without its price. And what, he asked slowly, does your king demand in return? The envoy's smile widened, though his eyes remained calculating. A bond between our realms. Blood joined to blood. The hand of your lord in marriage to Princess Celiora, daughter of Veynar. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut flesh. Rohan stiffened, his eyes narrowing. Marriage is diplomacy, an old tactic, but no less a chain for being gilded. Aylin's voice sliced through the stillness. You would trade him like a pawn on your board? She demanded, rising from her seat. He is lord of Frosthaven, not a token for your king's ambition. Gasps flared, but the envoy only inclined his head toward her, unshaken. And who speaks so boldly for Frosthaven's lord? A companion? An advisor? Or something less, official? A flush rose to Aylin's cheeks, but her hand drifted unconsciously toward her dagger. Lady Eris seized the moment like a hawk. It is a generous offer, she declared. Frosthaven has long stood alone, with nothing but wolves and winter at its back. An alliance could bring food for our people, coin for our coffers, and ships to guard our shores. Chancellor Tervain's thin voice followed. And legitimacy, he added. For though Lord Rohan has fought bravely, whispers of sorcery taint his rule. A bond with Veynar could cleanse such doubts. Rohan's jaw tightened until he thought his teeth would crack. To them, this was not about his will or his heart. It was politics, power dressed in silks. I will not be bound by chain or crown to any I do not choose, he said finally, his voice low but carrying. If your king seeks alliance, let it be forged in steel and honor, not in shackles. The envoy bowed again, though the smile had faded from his lips. I shall relay your words, my lord. But I caution you, winter swallows the proud as swiftly as the weak. Consider what gift you spurn. When the envoy withdrew, the chamber erupted with voices. Some hailed Rohan's defiance as strength, others muttered that he had doomed them all. Only Aylin stood silent, her hand still clenched upon the dagger at her side. Her eyes met Rohan's, fierce with unspoken words. Words that burned hotter than the council's endless prattle. Yet neither of them noticed the figure slipping from the chamber's rear, bearing a parchment sealed with wax. Not an envoy of Veynar, but a spy of Kaelor's, carrying news of Frosthaven's fracture straight into the waiting dark. And Kaelor, far away, would laugh when he read of it. Snow fell heavy that night, muffling the streets of Frosthaven in a ghostly silence. The torches along the walls burned low, their flames struggling against the wind. Most of the city slept, trusting the gates and guards to hold strong against the storm. But in the dark veins of the alleys, other fires stirred. Shadows moved, swift, silent, cloaked in black. Their boots left no prints in the snow. Their blades kissed with oil to swallow sound. Assassins. Gildred had never trusted the council chamber's sudden quiet after the envoy's departure. Too many whispers, too many glances traded between lords who once spat at one another like dogs. So he took to the streets, cloak pulled tight, hand never straying far from the hilt of his sword. It was there, near the market square, that he first heard it, the faint scrape of metal on stone. He slipped into shadow, eyes narrowing. And then he saw them. 5 figures scaling the walls of the keep itself. Gods, he muttered, and drew steel. The first assassin never saw him coming. Gildred's blade thrust through ribs, the man crumpling without a cry. But the others turned, knives flashing in the snowlight. They fought with trained precision, every strike aimed to kill. Gildred parried one, slashed the throat of another, and grappled a third to the ground. His breath plumed white, his blood sang with battle. Yet as the man fell, something slipped from his cloak. A parchment. Sealed. Gildred's eyes flicked down, his sword still ready. The wax bore not the mark of Veynar, nor Kaelor's black sigils. It was stamped with the crest of Frosthaven's own council, the serpent coiled around a crown. His gut twisted cold. These were no foreign assassins. They were Frosthaven's. Traitors, he growled, cutting down another. But the last slipped past him, bounding up the wall with a rope already hooked upon the stone. Gildred cursed and gave chase, but the assassin was swift. Within moments, the man had vanished into the keep's high windows. Inside, Rohan, Gildred bellowed, his voice tearing through the storm. To arms! They're inside. The alarm bells clanged to life, their toll shaking the city awake. Soldiers scrambled from barracks, torches flared to life, steel rang against steel. In the great hall, Rohan was already rising from his seat, the crystal at his chest glowing faintly as if it too sensed the danger. Aelin burst through the doors, bow drawn. "What is it?" she demanded. Gildred stormed in behind her, blood streaked across his armor. He flung the parchment onto the table. "Assassins. In the keep. And worse, they carry the council's own seal." The chamber froze. The lords present stared at the broken wax, horror mingled with guilt upon their faces. Some paled. Others pressed lips thin, saying nothing. "Which of you sent them?" Gildred roared, sword raised. But no one spoke. The silence itself was damning. A crash split the hall, a window shattering. Smoke rolled in, thick and choking, followed by the hiss of burning oil. Shapes moved in the haze, blades glinting. The assassins had arrived. And this time, their target was not soldiers nor spies. It was Rohan himself. The hall dissolved into chaos. Smoke poured through the shattered windows, turning torchlight into choking shadows. The assassins emerged like wraiths, faces hidden, blades dripping with venomous sheen. They did not waste time with guards or servants. Their eyes, hard, merciless, fixed only on Rohan. "Keep behind me," Gildred roared, stepping forward, sword cutting a silver arc. He clashed with the first intruder, steel shrieking against steel. Sparks spat across the marble floor as men screamed, the smoke swallowing them whole. Aelin moved swift as lightning. Her bow sang, each arrow loosed at deadly speed. One assassin crumpled, clutching a shaft buried in his chest. Another spun aside, vanishing into smoke, only to strike from behind, dagger grazing Aelin's shoulder before she rammed her knife beneath his ribs. But Rohan did not hide. The black crystal against his chest pulsed like a heartbeat, its glow cutting through the smoke. He drew his blade, and for a moment, the hall seemed to pause. The assassins faltered, as if some unseen force pressed down upon them. "Come then," Rohan growled, his voice carrying both fury and something darker. "You want me? Try." They surged. 3 blades slashed at once, one high, one low, one for his throat. Rohan moved as if guided by more than instinct. His sword met theirs in a storm of ringing steel, each strike turning with uncanny precision. His movements were no longer merely skilled, they were preternatural. The crystal's light flared with every clash, tendrils of shadow and frost curling from his strikes. One assassin screamed as Rohan's blade carved through his weapon, and his arm, in a single blow. Another stumbled back, frost spreading across his skin where the edge had kissed him. "By the gods," one council lord whispered, backing away, his face pale as milk. "He wields sorcery." Aelin heard, but her focus never broke. She planted an arrow in the assassin's throat before he could speak another word. Yet unease wormed in her chest. She had seen Rohan fight before, seen his fury, his skill. But this was something else. Something that did not belong wholly to him. "Rohan," she called, "don't let it take you." Her words cut through the haze for an instant, but then another assassin leapt from the shadows. A curved dagger struck toward Rohan's side, only for his hand to snap forward, seizing the man's wrist with crushing strength. Frost erupted where their skin met, crawling up the assassin's arm in jagged shards until it shattered like glass. The corpse fell to the ground in pieces. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even Gildred paused mid-strike, his eyes wide. Rohan turned, the black crystal glowing hotter, darker, as though feeding on the violence. For a heartbeat, his face looked wrong, shadows clinging too tight, eyes burning too cold. Then he drove his sword into the last assassin with a roar, pinning him to the hall's pillar. The chamber fell silent, smoke drifted, blood slicked the marble, but the silence was not relief. It was fear. The surviving council lords stared at their king, not with gratitude but suspicion. Whispers hissed through the chamber like snakes. "He's cursed, that's no man's power. Kalor's shadow lives in him." Rohan stood in the center of it all, chest heaving, the crystal dimming slowly. His eyes swept the room, catching the fear etched on every face. Even Aelin's gaze trembled, torn between love and dread. He realized, with a hollow ache, that though he had saved them, he might have lost them all the same. The bodies were scarcely cold before the council erupted. "They were after you," spat Lord Halvar, face mottled red, his silks smeared with soot. "And you brought their poison into our hall. That crystal." He jabbed a trembling finger toward Rohan's chest. "It is a beacon, a curse, a weapon of Kaelor's making. It will doom us all." Others joined, their voices rising like ravens in a storm. "He commands sorcery no mortal should wield. The shard corrupts him, you saw it. He is not our savior, he is our danger." The chamber shook with the weight of accusation. Rohan stood tall, though his hands still trembled from the power that had coursed through him. He met their fear with steel in his gaze. "I did not summon these assassins. I slew them. Without me, their blades would be in your throats. And in saving us," Lord Halvar sneered, "you showed what you've become, a king ruled by shadows. If that is the price of your power, then you are no better than Kaelor himself." Gasps echoed, but none refuted him. Even those who owed Rohan their lives shifted uneasily. Gildred slammed his sword against the floor. "Enough. Have you lost your wits? You speak of betrayal after the man just saved your hides?" But his fury did little to stem the tide. Fear was a poison more potent than steel. Aelin stepped forward, blood on her arm, voice sharp as flint. "He is your king. He fights for you while you cower behind words. Will you spit on loyalty because you tremble at what you don't understand?" "Understand?" one counselor hissed. "We understand too well. Power like that cannot be trusted. Either he surrenders the shard." His gaze swept the room, drawing nods from the others. "Or he surrenders the throne." The words struck like a hammer. The council chamber fell into stunned silence, heavy as stone. Rohan's jaw clenched. He felt the weight of every eye upon him, their loyalty eroding with every heartbeat. He had fought wars, bled for these people, lost friends, lost himself. And still, it was not enough. "I will not give you the shard," he said at last, voice low but unyielding. "Without it, we are blind against Kaelor's return. You would strip me of the one weapon that may yet save us." "No," Halvar growled, his voice rising. "We would strip you of the darkness that already claims you." The council lords pressed closer together, a wall of suspicion. It was no longer a debate. It was a reckoning. Rohan felt Aelin's hand brush his arm, grounding him, pulling him back from the edge. Her whisper was urgent, meant for him alone. "If you defy them now, they will call you tyrant. They will not wait. They will rise against you." Rohan's gaze swept the room, taking in their fear, their trembling courage sharpened into daggers of resolve. He realized the truth. The assassins had failed, but the council might yet succeed in undoing him. Not by blades, but by words. The choice pressed down on him like chains. Surrender the shard, or fight the council itself. Either path promised ruin. And then, the great doors of the hall boomed open. A messenger stumbled in, bloodied and gasping. "My lords, Frosthaven burns. The northern gates, they have fallen." The chamber froze. Fear turned to horror. And in that silence, every eye turned back to Rohan. The man they no longer trusted, yet the only one who might save them. The messenger collapsed to his knees, blood staining the council's pristine marble. His words echoed still, "Frosthaven burns." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The council lords, so loud in their fury moments ago, stood struck dumb. The scent of smoke and steel still lingered in the chamber from the assassination attempt, and now, the promise of more fire, more blood, pressed against their walls. Rohan stepped toward the messenger, his voice steady though his veins still burned with the shard's power. "Who leads the assault?" The man coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Banners, black as pitch, the serpent sigil. It is Kaelor's vanguard." The words dropped like a stone into a frozen lake. Murmurs rippled through the council, dread breaking through their anger. The serpent sigil was Kaelor's most feared host, merciless, relentless. If they had breached the gates, Frosthaven itself was at stake. Gildred's hand clenched his sword hilt until his knuckles whitened. "Then there is no time for squabbling. We ride now, or the city falls." But Lord Halvar, ever venomous, hissed back, "And ride behind what? A king half consumed by shadow? No. If he takes the shard into battle, we trade one tyrant for another." "You would argue while fire licks at your own roofs?" Gildred thundered. Better to have a king who fights, even with shadows, than to die with empty hands. The council split like a cracked stone. Some shouted for immediate defense, others for Rohan's abdication. The hall became a storm of words, useless, frantic, fatal. Rohan turned, meeting Aylin's eyes. She stood poised, fierce even with blood on her sleeve. "They will never follow if you force them," she said softly. "Not now. But the city cannot wait. You must choose." He looked to the doors, to the messenger still kneeling, trembling with pain. The fires of Frosthaven called to him. Yet behind him, the council sharpened its knives of doubt. If he marched now, he risked returning victorious only to find the throne stolen. But hesitation would mean the city's death. "I swore to protect Frosthaven," Rohan said, his voice rising above the din. "I will not watch from these walls while our people burn." He ripped his sword free, the black crystal against his chest flaring. "Those who stand with me, arm yourselves. Those who will not, stay and argue while the ashes choke you." A stunned silence followed. For the briefest breath, no one moved. Then Gildred stepped forward, planting himself at Rohan's side. "I stand with my king." Aylin's bow was already in her hand. "And I." A few younger lords, shaken but resolute, nodded and followed. Yet many of the elder voices, including Halvar, stayed rooted in place, their fears stronger than their loyalty. "You march into damnation." Halvar spat, but Rohan no longer listened. The doors boomed open again as guards rushed in with weapons, rallying behind their king. The thunder of boots and the clatter of steel filled the chamber as the warband gathered. Rohan looked back once, at the councillors huddled in their own fear, whispering, plotting even now. He knew they would not forget his defiance. When the fires were quenched, his greatest battle might not be against Kaelor's armies, but against the vipers in his own hall. He strode from the chamber, the shard pulsing against his heart like a second heartbeat, frost trailing in his wake. The war for Frosthaven had begun. The streets of Frosthaven burned red against the night sky. Flames leapt from rooftops, devouring timber and thatch as smoke coiled into the heavens. The clash of steel rang from every alley, mingled with the screams of the dying. Rohan rode at the head of his warband, his sword raised high, the shard pulsing cold against his chest. Each heartbeat thrummed with unnatural vigor, sharpening his senses, steadying his grip. Yet with every surge of strength came a whisper at the edge of thought. Kaelor's laughter, faint, insidious. "Hold the lines," Gildred bellowed, voice carrying like a war horn. "Drive them back to the gates." The enemy poured through Frosthaven's northern quarter, warriors clad in blackened mail, their serpent banners snapping in the wind. They fought with a fanatic's fury, striking down citizen and soldier alike. The vanguard of Kaelor's host had struck deep, and already the cobblestones ran slick with blood. Aylin loosed arrow after arrow from her saddle, her eyes keen as hawks. "Rohan, the gatehouse," she cried, pointing. Through the smoke, he saw it. The northern gate, half broken, its defenders overwhelmed. If the enemy seized it fully, the city would be lost. "Form with me," Rohan roared, spurring his horse forward. His men followed, shields raised, blades gleaming in firelight. The charge thundered down the street, scattering foes in their path. Rohan's sword sang as it met flesh, cleaving through armor, shattering shields. Where steel alone should have struggled, frost leapt from his blade, freezing men in mid-scream, their bodies fracturing like shattered glass. His warriors gasped but pressed on, emboldened by the slaughter he wrought. Yet with each strike, the shard's hunger deepened. The frost did not wait for his will. It leapt ahead of his blade, eager, greedy, seeking life to devour. At the gatehouse, the defenders rallied as Rohan's band struck. Gildred smashed an axe through a raider's helm, his laughter grim. "They bleed, they bleed." Aylin vaulted from her horse onto the wall, loosing arrows point blank into the foe. "Push them out, push them back." But even as the tide shifted, a new sound rose above the din, a war horn, deep and venomous. The serpent banner warriors pulled aside, and through the smoke came a figure towering in black steel, helm wrought like a viper's fangs. His blade was jagged obsidian, his presence radiating malice. The soldiers around him knelt, chanting a single word, Veynar. Veynar. Rohan felt the shard pulse violently, almost in recognition. The black-armored champion raised his sword and pointed directly at Rohan. "Iceborn," His voice boomed, unnaturally loud, carrying over fire and battle. Kaelor claims your soul. Face me, or watch your city choke on ash. The battlefield stilled, as if even death itself paused to hear. Both armies turned their gaze upon the two men. Rohan's grip tightened. The shard thrummed like a living heart, eager for the duel, whispering of power, of triumph, of blood. Gildred leaned close, breath ragged. This is no common man. He reeks of Kaelor's sorcery. Strike him down, and the vanguard may falter. Aelin's voice cut sharp, fearful. Rohan, beware. This is not just a champion. He's bait. Kaelor wants this fight. The frost along Rohan's blade hissed in the firelight. The choice weighed heavy. If he fought and won, the city might yet stand. But each swing would pull him deeper into Kaelor's grasp. He lifted his sword, pointing it at the serpent champion. The flames painted his face in shades of war and shadow. Then let him come, Rohan growled. The champion strode forward, the crowd parting around him, and the ground itself seemed to tremble at his steps. The duel for Frosthaven was about to begin. The street fell silent but for the crackle of flames and the hiss of falling snow. All eyes fixed upon the two figures facing one another. Rohan, frost curling from his blade, and Veynar, clad in black steel that drank the firelight. The champion's helm, wrought like a serpent's maw, gleamed as he raised his jagged sword. The wolf comes to the serpent's fangs, Veynar said, his voice resonant, unnatural, as if a dozen whispers echoed behind each word. Rohan's chest tightened. The shard throbbed against his ribs, filling him with cold fire. It urged him forward, as if Kaelor's will pressed his very blood. He swallowed the fear, lifted his blade high, and stepped into the circle of death. The first clash was thunder. Steel against steel, a spark shower that lit the night. Veynar's strength was monstrous. Each strike jarred Rohan to the bone, forcing his arms numb. But the shard surged, lending him speed and fury. He met blow for blow, frost snaking along his sword. Not enough, Veynar sneered, parrying with brutal ease. His obsidian blade sang as he swung wide, forcing Rohan back. You are but a hound wearing Kaelor's chain. Rohan's teeth clenched. Then break me, if you can. The duel raged down the cobbled street, scattering soldiers who dared too near. Gildred shouted orders to hold the lines, to keep the serpent banner warriors from flooding the gatehouse. Aelin watched from the wall, every arrow held tight, every muscle taut with dread. With a roar, Rohan struck, frost exploding from his blade. Shards of ice speared toward Veynar, piercing through shield and flesh of the warriors nearby. The champion staggered, but only for a breath. He twisted his blade, and a wave of shadow burst forth, devouring the frost, snuffing it like candle flame. Rohan's heart lurched. The shard pulsed hotter, harsher, almost angry. The laughter came again, faint, mocking, Kaelor's voice in his skull. Yes, wolf. More. Feed me more. He charged, steel whistling. Their blades locked again, faces inches apart. Through the slits of Veynar's helm, eyes burned like coals. Every swing binds you tighter, the champion hissed. Kaelor thanks you with every breath. Rohan growled, shoving him back, sparks bursting as their blades scraped. He struck again, faster, harder, frost wrapping the steel like a storm. Veynar blocked, but his armor cracked, shards of ice spreading across it. For a heartbeat, Rohan saw weakness. He drove his blade deep, but Veynar caught it with his gauntlet, frost-searing flesh, and laughed. You think you fight a man? Veynar bellowed. I am forged of Kaelor's hate. With a violent twist, he wrenched Rohan's sword aside and smashed his obsidian blade across the wolf lord's chest. The force hurled Rohan to the cobblestones, breath torn from his lungs. The shard blazed with freezing fire, searing his skin. Aelin screamed from the wall. Rohan. Veynar raised his sword high, obsidian gleaming with hungry black fire. Soldiers shouted, frozen between fear and hope, waiting for their lord to rise. The shard pulsed again, harder, deeper, not a heartbeat now, but a command. Power surged into Rohan's veins, cold and absolute. He felt his hands tighten on the hilt, his breath turned to frost, his eyes burn with unnatural light. He rose, slow but steady, frost spiraling around him. The soldiers gasped. Even Veynar paused, tilting his helm, as if surprised. Rohan's voice, when it came, was not fully his own. It carried Kaelor's shadow, an echo beneath each word. You will not break me. He raised his sword. The frost stormed higher, and the duel entered its second, deadlier dance. The air itself seemed to freeze as Rohan rose, frost swirling in a crown about his shoulders. Snow hardened to ice beneath his boots. The shard's pulse echoed through the night, not only in his chest but in every soldier's heart, a rhythm of dread, of awe. "By the gods," whispered one of his men, clutching his spear tight. He's not Rohan anymore." Yet others, eyes blazing with desperate hope, lifted their shields higher. If their lord had become a weapon of winter itself, then perhaps no blade could break Frosthaven. Veynar lunged first, obsidian sword slashing in a black arc. Rohan met it with a roar, their blades colliding in an eruption of frost and shadow. The shockwave hurled men to the ground, torches guttering out, snow flung high as if the heavens themselves had been struck. The serpent banner warriors surged forward, emboldened by their champion's fury. But Gildred met them head-on, shield bash and steel carving a wall between them and his lord. "Hold the line," he bellowed. "No man crosses while he fights." Aelin loosed arrow after arrow from the wall. Each found its mark, but for every enemy that fell, two more pressed forward. The clash below was no longer a battle but a storm. Men crushed in the surge, blood steaming against the ice. Rohan's sword whirled, every strike trailing frost that burned as cold as fire. He pressed Veynar back step by step, until the champion staggered against the charred husk of a cart. For the first time, Rohan thought he heard strain in his foe's laugh. "You burn bright, wolf," Veynar rasped, armor cracking under the frost. But flames that burned too fierce soon consumed themselves. Rohan struck again and again, fury in every blow. He no longer knew if it was his strength or the shards, his mind felt split, one voice urging restraint, the other shrieking for blood. "Finish him," Kalor's whisper coiled in his skull. "Break him, and you will break his master's chain." But beneath that command was something darker, something eager. Rohan saw flashes in his mind, villages frozen solid, men turned to statues of ice, children's screams shattering into silence. His hand faltered for a heartbeat. Veynar seized the moment. With a roar, he drove his sword into Rohan's side. Armor buckled, flesh tore, and blood steamed in the snow. Rohan cried out, staggering. The shard blazed, and the wound froze shut before his eyes, sealing, but not healing. His skin blackened with veins of frost. The soldiers who saw gasped in horror. Some made signs against evil. "He's cursed," one whispered. "Kalor's mark." Yet others shouted louder, raising blades. "Frosthaven, for the Wolf Lord." The city trembled between faith and fear. Rohan, panting, locked eyes with Veynar. "If I am cursed," he growled, frost smoke spilling from his lips, "then let the curse destroy you." He lifted his sword high. Frost spiraled into a cyclone, the shard blazing like a black star. Aelin's voice pierced the storm. "Rohan, stop," but her words were drowned as he struck. The ground split open, ice erupting in jagged spears that tore through the street. Veynar's laugh turned to a scream as frost engulfed him, his armor cracking, his body consumed. Shadow bled from him like smoke, swallowed by the ice. When it ended, silence fell. Veynar was gone. Only a twisted, frozen statue remained, locked in a scream. Rohan swayed, frost still seething from his body. He looked at his men. They stared back, torn between reverence and terror. Gildred's face was grim. Aelin's eyes brimmed with tears. And in the silence, Kalor's laughter thundered in Rohan's skull, triumphant. The frozen statue of Veynar glimmered beneath the torchlight, each jagged shard reflecting the horror and awe in the eyes of Frosthaven's defenders. Yet the moment of triumph was fragile, brittle as the ice that still coated the streets. Gildred stepped forward, face pale beneath his helm. "Rohan, you've won," he said slowly, voice trembling. "But at what cost?" Rohan's hands still shook. The shard in his chest pulsed with a rhythm that was not entirely his own, a heartbeat of shadow that seemed to echo Kalor's laughter. "Cost?" he rasped. "They would have died without me. They would have bled to nothing." Aelin knelt beside him, brushing snow from his cloak. "And yet, look around you," she whispered. "The people, they fear you. Not as their lord, but as something other." Rohan's gaze swept the city. Soldiers whispered behind shields, citizens huddled in doorways, eyes wide with awe and terror. The banners of Frosthaven fluttered like fragile reeds in the winter wind, unable to mask the unease curling through every alley. From the highest balcony, the council watched. High Chancellor Dareth's hands clenched around the stone rail. Too powerful, he muttered, eyes narrowed. The Wolf Lord is no longer a man we can control. He is a weapon, a curse. Other councillors nodded, murmurs spreading like wildfire. A threat to the city, to the kingdoms, one whispered. We cannot leave him unchecked. Rohan heard none of it. His thoughts were occupied with the shard, its dark pulse thrumming in his veins. Kaelor's voice was faint now, a shadow beneath his will, coaxing him toward greater fury, greater destruction. Yet beneath that, Rohan's own resolve surged. We survived this night, he said finally, voice low but firm. And I will not bow to fear. But the council had already decided. Messengers moved quickly through the streets, their orders sharp and uncompromising. Soldiers loyal to other lords began to patrol near the gates, whispers of arrest, of confinement, of trial. The walls of Frosthaven trembled with anticipation of confrontation not from without, but from within. Rohan's men rallied to him, forming a protective ring around their lord. They cannot touch him, Gildred said fiercely. Not while I stand. Yet even their courage had limits. Rumors spread faster than the soldiers could hold them at bay. Merchants whispered in the market. The Iceborn Lord had become an abomination. Children hid, hearing tales of frost and death. And through the night, Kaelor's laughter wove itself into every shadow, every corner, every heartbeat. The sorcerer's whisper promised ruin and glory in equal measure. The council will tremble. The city will fracture. And you will either rise or fall in your own storm. By dawn, Frosthaven was a city on the edge. The victory against Veynar had been complete, but it had painted Rohan as something more than man. The citizens, the soldiers, the council, all now viewed him with the same awe and fear that had marked the battlefield. And somewhere high in the towers, a messenger delivered a sealed scroll to the High Chancellor. The wax bore the mark of distant lords, each seal a warning. The council would not wait, alliances were forming, armies were moving. Frosthaven itself would be besieged, not by raiders but by kings and merchants, lords and mercenaries, all eager to see if the Iceborn could be controlled, or destroyed. Rohan looked toward the horizon, frost curling around his armor. His breath misted in the cold, words forming on his lips like a vow to the storm itself. I will not be broken, he murmured. Not by men, not by councils, not by Kaelor. Frosthaven will stand, and I will stand with it. But even as he swore it, the shard pulsed harder, cold and relentless. Somewhere far away, Kaelor's voice laughed again, dark and triumphant. The wolf does not yet see the trap. Soon, he will.